Hey guys, in this video we're quickly going to be creating, or hopefully, probably not quickly, but it's going to take some time, but we're going to be creating a desktop chat application. And I'm creating this application not to necessarily showcase a great chat application. It's not about the UX at this point. We're just going to go and see how we can actually create a complex layout in Figma. So I already have some examples from Dribble of some great designers and some great work. And we're just going to be replicating some of those elements, taking inspiration from them, just to actually see how we can go about creating those elements. So the first thing that we obviously need to do is we need to create a desktop window. Now that I have that done, I'm going to create an auto layout sidebar. So here we have the sidebar, and let me just move it at the top. Also, one thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to make this background slightly darker so I can see some of my sidebar and some of the other elements. So here I see my sidebar. Let's just go ahead and actually make it a bit more darker. So here we have the sidebar, and let me just go ahead and actually mute my notifications so I don't get disturbed. So I have them muted, and let's just go ahead and actually create a logo at the top. So I've seen a lot of applications actually have the logo at the top, so let's just do that. I'm going to create the logo 64 by 64 pixels, going to give this a primary background. This is a color that I've decided, but obviously you can choose any other color that you want. The application is going to be named QWERTY, so I'm just going to use QWERTY here. I'm going to create a large font and basically just place it. And here we have our logo. Obviously you can make the logo a bit more complicated if you want. I'm also going to go ahead and make this 16 pixels. One thing that we obviously should do is always open the page in the prototype view so we can see how it looks visually. So I think the logo looks actually a bit big, so I'm going to make this 56 maybe. I think this is probably fine. So let's just go ahead and add some spacing on the left and the right. So here we have the logo at the top. Let's just name the sidebar to sidebar. Press enter to select the children and say this is going to be our logo. So here we have the logo. Then we basically have some icons. So I'm just basically going to go ahead and choose the Font Awesome library to actually add those icons. I'm going to go ahead and make them larger and basically obviously center the whole thing as well. Horizontally, not vertically, because we want the logo at the top. So we can have the home icon, we can have the pie minus chart icon, we can have, what other icons do people have? So they have the user icon, they have a chart icon. Maybe we can also add a grid icon. So grid, we can also add, I don't like the grid icon, sorry. So instead we can have a messages icon, we can have a settings icon. Sorry, so the settings icon can actually be done with the gear thing. Also, let's see some of the other icons that people have. So we can probably have a search icon as well. So let's just add a search. Also, what else? Maybe add a calendar icon as well in the mix. So calendar minus day. And I think these icons should be fine. One thing that I obviously want to do is I want to move the search icon at the bottom instead of actually with all of these icons. So let's go ahead and actually group all of these items inside of an auto layout. And let's just do that by basically selecting all of the items from the sidebar. That's much easier. Center them, give some spacing in between them. And I think the messages icon can be the second one. So let's just go ahead and actually make that active because we're going to be designing that page. I'm going to make it active and just going to make it slightly bold. And then I'm also going to give this auto. So we basically have the icons at the middle, and then we have the settings bar at the bottom. And we can also have some of these icons at the top with the logo, and we can do that by placing them in an auto layout and basically just giving some spacing in between them. I think 48 pixels is fine. So here we have our sidebar done. One other thing that I want to add is I want to add a shadow to the sidebar. So let's just go ahead and do that. So the blur I think can be 12, the Y can be 0, and this should be, I don't know, maybe 6. So here we have a nice falling effect. And now let's just go ahead and create our second panel. So the second panel is going to live behind the sidebar because we want the shadow to go on top of it. So I'm going to give this an auto layout as well. And basically going to fix the height and the width by, again, using the shortcut keys to actually expand and then expand the size of it. And if you actually manually expand the size of any auto layout container, then it automatically goes fixed instead of hug contents. So So I'm going to make this white as well. And as you can see, we have the shadow coming on top, but it's very subtle. So I'm just going to go ahead and make this 24. I'm going to make this 8. So now we can see the shadow a bit more prominent. Let's go ahead and actually add a heading now. So I'm going to say we're going to have a messages heading, and I'm going to use the H3 that I've defined. So this is a font Metropolis, and I'm going to give this a black background. We're going to give an auto layout around this as well. And we're going to remove the auto layout on the messages panel. I'm going to rename that as well. And this particular thing is going to be the heading. So I'm going to expand that completely, and right beside the message, we're going to have a number. So let's just go ahead and actually, first of all, detach it, make this 12, and maybe give a number 12 as well. I'm going to change the left and right padding to 2 and 8. I'm going to give this a background of gray minus 200. I'm going to give this a radius of, I don't know, 24, and then basically center it. So here we have our messages container. I'm also going to make this an auto layout because I basically want a plus icon here. So I'm going to go ahead and create a frame here that's maybe 32 pixels in size, and we're going to give a background to it similar to our primary color, and also going to give it a shadow as well, just to have a really nice effect. And that can also be, again, primary, our primary color. Actually, it can be darker. So let's just make it darker, make the Y 0 so it's all around, and just reduce the opacity to maybe 24, and the blur, increase the blur to 12. So here we have our basically plus icon, and I'm going to go ahead and copy this particular icon so I don't have to change the font or anything. I'm going to make this regular, and also going to make this slightly smaller. So here we have a 16 pixel plus icon. Here we have that, and I'm just going to make this auto to give the maximum amount of spacing in between them. We can also make this icon a bit smaller. Let's just have a look at how it looks here. I think it looks fine. This can actually be solid, and now let's just go ahead and add some spacing all around. Maybe 24 pixel spacing, or a 20 minus 24 pixel spacing, or maybe a 24 pixel spacing looks fine. That's done. Let's go ahead and actually add a border here. So this is going to be our divider. I'm going to rename that to a divider. I'm going to make this 0, 0, 0, and just going to reduce the opacity by pressing the shortcut keys 1, 2, whatever. I'm going to make this 12 pixels in terms of, 12 opacity, 12% opacity in terms of its visibility, or maybe let's just try 8. So 0, 8, if you press 0, 8, you're going to get the 8 opacity, and I think that looks fine. One other thing that I obviously want to add here is I want to add a search bar. One thing that I want to do, I want to center this whole thing horizontally as well. So if we add a search bar, it starts from the middle. So here we have the search bar starting from the middle. I'm actually going to give this whole thing a header, another container, because we have the divider in there. This is going to be the content, the divider, and then we have the search bar. I'm going to give the search bar a gray background. I'm going to then give this a border radius, and also going to give some spacing in between these elements. Maybe a 16 pixel spacing is fine here, or 24 was probably fine. And then I'm going to expand it completely. And let's just actually, instead of expanding the search bar completely, actually give an auto layout around this whole thing as well. So here we have an auto layout defined, and let's just make this fill container, both of these things fill container as well. I'm going to make a 24 pixel space, I'm going to give this a 24 pixel padding all around it. So let's just see how it looks. I think it's sitting in the correct position. I'm going to make this 48 just to be a multiple of 4. I'm going to add a icon in there. I'm going to name this search. I'm going to make this centered, 10 minus 16, just to have some spacing on the left. I'm going to make this regular and say search messages. So obviously currently we have the font awesome icon selected, which we don't want. So I'm going to use this icon. I'm going to reduce the opacity to 16, regular opacity reduced to 5 to 40 pixels. And I'm going to use the same thing here, black, and then opacity reduced by pressing the hotkeys, and that should be done. I'm also going to increase the spacing on the left and the right just to be slightly larger, and I think these things can actually be smaller, so I'm going to make them 14. So I think our search messages is done. So let's just go ahead and create a messages component. So again, I'm not going to be doing this whole design, otherwise this video would be very long. So I'm just going to do these both panels in this video and going to do this whole panel or probably this whole panel, depending on what I'm taking inspiration from, on the right. So now that we have that done, we have the messages done, I think we can also add a drop down on the right. So again, I'm going to choose this icon. I'm going to say arrow minus down, or angle minus down, most probably. Regular, reduce the font size. And I think this looks fine, though I think it can even be smaller, and we can also reduce the spacing in between these elements. So maybe 6. Yep, I think that's probably fine. So now let's go ahead and actually add our messages box. In the message box, we're basically going to first of all have an image, and let's just make the image maybe 48 pixels. And I'm also going to give this image a fill for now. For now, let's just add a fill that's dark, and we can obviously fill this text. This is enter your full name here. Let's just go ahead and actually choose the same font, make this 16, and maybe bold, or maybe semi-bold. Let's see how that looks. I think that probably looks fine. Let's just go ahead and duplicate this and basically create an auto layout around these items and reduce the spacing to 16, and this is going to be enter your message here. So here we're basically going to be adding our messages here and some of the elements here. I'm also going to reduce the opacity to 6 here and increase the opacity here. I think this can actually be even smaller, so maybe 12 pixel is fine, and this can actually be 14. So this looks fine. Also, let's go ahead and actually center this whole thing so the image and this particular thing is centered. Also increase the radius on the image to be slightly lighter. To be slightly rounded, and then also we probably need to give this an auto layout as well. So I've done that, and this can also be fill container. And now that we have this element, I'm basically going to move this thing at the basically here. I'm going to say this is going to be 12 minutes. So this is obviously going to be an indicator of when we actually receive the message. As you can see, one minor thing that's off is that these both things aren't aligned. So instead of giving it outside, we can actually just give it here and create an auto layout and basically have it side by side. And I can say this is going to be auto, this is going to be full, and this whole thing is also going to be fill container, and this is also going to be fill containers, just so we have both those items on the same line. I'm going to reduce the opacity to something light. That looks fine. So the spacing on the left and the right here is 24, so let's just make that consistent, 24 here as well. And maybe this can actually be 12 and 12 from the bottom and from the top and the bottom, or maybe 24 from the top, and then well, maybe it can actually be 12 and 12 here, and this can also be 12 and 24. So we can now actually make these. This is going to be our messages list. I've actually created an auto layout around it. I'm going to press enter and make these both children fixed as well. So here we have our full name and the message. I think the message can actually be even lighter. Let's see if we need anything else. So some people actually have these labels here as well, and we can do that as well. So that they have a label, this particular thing has a label. So maybe the label can actually be, I don't know, we can just copy this. It can be a question, and it can be whatever. So in order to do that, let's first of all create a label. So let's say this is going to be a label for the question. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say label / question. I'm going to create a component around it. Basically say that the padding of this is going to be 4,8. The border radius is going to be 12. I'm going to give this a background of, let's say, orange 300, and then maybe orange 200, and this particular text can actually be orange 500. So here we have the question label. Let's just go ahead and name this, change the text here to be title. I'm going to go ahead and actually just press the plus key. So here we have the variations, and this is the question, and this is going to be maybe, I don't know, request. So let's just make this request, or maybe make this help wanted, and change this to green. So I'm going to say 200. I'm going to make this green 200, and I'm going to make this text 500. So basically green 500, and press enter. just so it's consistent and using the same style. So again, I've grabbed these styles from Tailwind, and I can actually instead make this 600 and this 600 as well. And then we can also add another label, which is going to be our default label. So I'm just going to press Command D, and this is going to be a default label, which is just going to be a gray label, or maybe it's not even going to have a fill. It's going to have a stroke of, let's say, 400, and this text can actually just be gray 600. This is going to be some text, or we can actually just go and add these elements here. So I'm going to basically add one element here. So let's just go ahead and add that, and another element, and obviously we want these side by side, so let's just go ahead and actually make them side by side. Going to give some spacing in between them, 8 pixels, and actually these look larger, so I'm just going to reduce the actually the font should probably be fine. I'm just going to reduce the padding top and bottom, so I'm going to make the padding top and bottom 2 pixels. So I think that those look a bit thin now, and I think this is fine. So we're basically going to first of all place these two into an auto layout, and just going to go ahead and add some spacing here. Maybe 12 pixel spacing is fine. So the first thing is a question, and then this can actually be the second variant, which is help wanted. And this whole thing can actually be top aligned, so we want the image always to be at the top. So now that we have this component done, I'm just going to make this a component, and this is going to be our message component. And we basically have some elements in there. I can also again remove the group here because we don't have other elements inside of it, so we don't need it. Going to give some spacing in between these elements. This is fill container. Let's see if all of these are fill container. This should also be a fill container. This should be a fill container. There should be some spacing in between these so it doesn't go completely there. So here we basically have our message component, and I'm just going to duplicate it multiple times, and I'm going to grab the original message component and place it outside. So now that we have that done, I'm going to basically select all of these images. I'm going to go to content reel, and I am going to update the images. So I'm going to go to my avatars, and I'm going to say apply all. So here we have again apply all because I see some duplicates. So I think this is fine. We're going to go and select all of the names. I'm going to go back. I'm going to go to the full name male. So now we have the males, and let's just go ahead and actually grab all of these messages, and I'm going to go and search for message, and let's see if we have some small message examples in the content reel plugin. So yeah, here we have them. So here we have the messages, and I think those look fine. One important thing to note, as you can see, some of the messages are actually being very dull, and even the illustration or even the emoji is dull, which is something we obviously don't want. So I'm actually going to go ahead, instead of saying that this whole thing is going to be reduced in opacity, I'm going to reduce the opacity of the fill, and in that way the message, if it contains an emoji, it's not going to be reduced in opacity. So let's just add some other emojis as well, just to make it a bit more prominent. So yeah, I think this looks good. And here we have some of the options. Let's go ahead and actually modify them. So maybe we don't need a question here, and instead of this particular label, we actually need the default label, so we can just add the default label here. Maybe instead of this, we also need the default one. Maybe instead of a question, this is a request. Or maybe this actually is a request, just to keep it a bit more dynamic. And let's just remove this one and instead change this particular one to actually default, and say this is going to be a answer or a follow-up. This is also consistent, so I obviously want to go ahead and remove that. So maybe this can be a bug, and this can be Hacktoberfest. So here we basically have the sidebar done, and we have the messages panel done. And as you can see, it took some time, but it was done really quickly. Let's just go ahead and actually change these as well. So 24 minutes, 1 hour, 5 hours, make this 2 days, or maybe 2 day, and then 1 month. So I think this probably looks fine, though I think the spacing in between these elements is slightly larger. So let me just make that 8, and let's see how that looks. I think that looks good. One other thing that I obviously also want to do is I want to add a hover state for this particular component. So I'm going to detach it, and I'm going to first of all say this is going to be the default. And actually I didn't have to detach it. I can just remove it, and I can say I can use the plus icon here. And basically I'm going to give a border radius here, and I'm going to say this is basically going to have a fill of, or maybe let's just actually add a fill ourselves. This is going to have a fill that's going to be slightly grayish in tone. I think this is fine, and this is going to be the hover variant. So this is going to be hover, this is going to be default, and we're just going to change this property to state. So now let's just hover over this particular element, and I think this looks good. One thing that I obviously actually want to do is I want all of these elements to stay the same in terms of, let's say, width. So I'm going to go and select all of these elements first of all by default. That's something that we can do, or we can actually just change the width from here. But as you can see, it's not being respected because we have the fill container applied on all of these items. So I'm going to go and I'm going to again group them, and then I'm going to say this is going to be our message list, and this is going to be our global list or something. Obviously the naming, I'm not concerned about the naming right now. I'm going to give a 24 pixel spacing on the left and the 24 pixel spacing on the right. Or maybe it can be slightly less, 16 and 16. So now that we have that done, what I basically want to do is I want to make this fill container. So as you can see now, this particular message list is fill, but we also need to make this fill again. So this is also fill. One thing obviously that has happened here is some of these elements are not fixed. So let's see if there's something that we can fix. So this should also be fixed, and this thing should also be fixed. So now that it's fixed, as you can see, we have, it's much better. But one thing that you can actually note is we have a 24 pixel padding on the right, which is a bit too much. So let's just go ahead and actually reduce that to maybe 8. So that's done, and we probably have to do the same thing here. So maybe just the 24 should be 8 here, and this should be fill. This is already fill. This should also be fill, and this inside one should also be fill, so it's responsive. So here we have that done. And I actually am doubting if whether we even need the 24 on the left as well. So let's just go ahead and actually say 12 minus 16, or maybe 12 all around, and see how that looks. So I think this looks good. I also want to go ahead and actually add some spacing in between these items. So I'm going to add an 8 pixel spacing here. And instead of, let's say, the gray color here, let's just go and actually give it some color. And actually we can use the same purple color or the base color that we have and give it a reduced opacity, maybe 6%, and see how that looks. So I think that probably looks fine, and that's going to be it for this video. Maybe I'll do the other part of this video in probably tomorrow or the day after. But hopefully this helps. This teaches you how to actually use auto layout and Figma to basically create complex designs, and how to create reusable components. That's going to be pretty much it. Do subscribe to hit the bell icon, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.